Hey, what's up guys? Today we are doing my August wrap up and I've actually had such a good reading month. I have had five-star books, which never happens to me. Like I never have that many five-star books. I maybe have like one a month, but this month I have five and two of those are like definite new favorites. So that's very exciting. So I'm really excited to get into it. I've also got a few books I don't like as much and one of them I'm going to kind of just skim over because I don't even want to waste time talking about it. But other than that, looking forward to talking about these books. If you enjoy this video, please leave a like, please subscribe, and let's get started with the very first book. So the very first book that I'm just going to quickly mention is Midnight Sun by Stephanie Meyer. I done a full review about this. I was the first person to get a review up on YouTube, which I was excited about. I love doing that. I read the entire book in 11 hours. It's like almost 800 pages, so it was hard work. But if you don't know, somehow this is Twilight from Edward's perspective. It was released for the 15th anniversary of the original Twilight book, and I loved it, but I definitely think that if you're not a Twilight fan, like don't read it. Like it is a book for fans. Like there's so much information. It's like so over explained in parts, but it's like because Stephanie Meyer wants to give all the fans basically everything they could ever want. So it is a book for fans, and as a Twilight fan, I enjoyed it. But definitely, like if you're not a Twilight fan, you're probably going to think, what even is this? Like this is so slow paced. And I know a lot of people have said it's putting them in reading slumps and stuff, but I don't know. I really enjoyed it personally, and that's what counts. The second book I read this month was The Well of Loneliness by Radcliffe Hall, and I love this book. Okay, so this is one of the first books, if not the first book, that was ever published about a lesbian, and it was released in 1928. It became like an instant classic, and for years it was the only real mainstream book about lesbians. Up until like the 80s, I read online, like people always went back to The Well of Loneliness because it was like the only one really available. This follows Stephen as she grows up and has various relationships. You know, we see her as a young child, how she deals with her sexuality without even realising that's what it was. And then as she gets older and becomes more confident in herself and things like that. Her father loves her for who she is, but her mother does not approve. Her mother is not like into it. She's like, you are a disappointment to me, that kind of thing. And I just thought Stephen was such a gripping character. Like you really just wanted to root for her. Like she goes through so much in this book. Like I don't want to spoil anything because I think it's just one of those books that you just need to read and enjoy for yourself. But so many different things happen with the relationships, like falling apart and like her family and everything. And I just thought it was so good. It was really interesting as well, obviously, to see the thoughts on lesbianism, and is that a word? The thoughts on lesbians at the time and like how society treated them and everything like that. It was just really fascinating. I also thought, so I don't know if this is a buddy read, and what we discussed at one point was the fact that maybe if more of the language around transgender people existed back then, this book would be a different story, because there's a lot of the time that Stephen kind of portrays herself as being a man trapped in a woman's body, but obviously back then that's kind of what lesbians were seen as being. They were seen as like having masculine energy. I don't know, it's obviously very different. But I just thought it was really interesting, the entire thing, and I will do, I don't know, okay, skip the next 15 seconds if you don't want any spoilers. But there is like, is a tragic ending, which is pretty common for the time for like gay stories and stuff like that. So I know a lot of people don't like that, but that's what it is. But yeah, I overall really loved this, and I really recommend it to everyone. The next book I read was Rob Roy by Walter Scott, and this is a Scottish classic released in 1817, and I hated this book, and I don't want to even talk about it because honestly it was so boring. So I started trying to read it physically, and after like 100, I think I got 100 pages physically, and I was like, I cannot do this. So I switched to the audiobook, and I'm not gonna lie, I just did not take anything in. It was just not interesting to me. I actually technically DNF'd it with like 80 pages left because there was still like 2 hours left of the audiobook or something, and I was like, I can't listen to this anymore. So I looked up on Wikipedia to see if it was worth continuing, and yeah, I couldn't even make myself read the Wikipedia summary. That's how bored I was of the story. So I'm not even going to talk about it really. I'm not going to summarize it because I just don't care. Next, I read How to Be an Antiracist by Ibram X. Kendi. And honestly, I don't think this is a good introduction to non-fiction about racism. So I gave this 3 stars, and I think it is important, and it's a very interesting outlook on one person's experience, but it very much is like this author's experience. So it's very autobiographical. There's a lot of personal anecdotes throughout the entire book. The ideas aren't fully accessible, I don't think, to like the average person, and it's not very well explained because it feels like a lot of the time he's in the middle of an idea. So he starts every chapter with a personal story, and then it kind of forms into an idea, and I like that. I like the way it flowed. But then just as he was at the cusp of like the ideas being fully explained, he would then go back into another personal anecdote, and I felt like it just never fully properly got to the point of most of his ideas. It was also very, very American centric, and something that because I was on Goodreads looking at other people's thoughts, and a lot of people that were Asian were actually reviewing this book, which I thought was interesting, and they were saying like, this is only about Black Americans, like this does not have anything to do with like racism towards anyone apart from Black Americans. So I thought that was interesting to point out as well. I don't think it's a bad book by any like way. I just think that it's not what I was expecting or not what I was wanting. I was wanting, you know, a lot more facts, and this was a lot more personal and autobiographical. It is very intersectional, which is good. So they talk about sexuality, they talk about gender, and how race kind of goes into all of these things. So that is obviously really good to have all of that interconnected. But some of the ideas are so extreme that it kind of puts you off unless you're like very, very, very left leaning. Like there was a chapter on capitalism and how all capitalism is racist, and the ideas just seemed like ridiculous. It's like you understood what he was trying to say, and like it did make sense, but I felt like he just went in too deep. I don't know, like, and that was another chapter that when I was reading the reviews, that is the one that a lot of people kind of pull up as being like, this was just kind of not it, you know what I mean? I think if you've read a few other non-fictions about race, then this could be like an interesting one to have as an extra, you know, to have like someone else's perspective on ideas. But I definitely don't think this should be like an introduction to non-fiction on racism, because honestly it's kind of confusing and it didn't really, and I feel like I didn't learn anything. I feel like the only thing I remember from it is this man's personal stories, which is interesting, but like it's not super helpful, you know what I mean? So yeah, I gave it 3 stars, and I felt bad about it because obviously it isn't you know, important book, but I just don't think it really achieves its goal. If the goal is to like teach you how to be an anti-racist, I feel like it doesn't teach that goal. So this next book is one of my new all-time favourites, and it is Boys Swallows Universe by Trent Dalton. And although I'm saying it's one of my all-time favourites, I don't actually want to tell you that much about it because I went into this basically completely blind, and it was so good. So it is an Australian book about 2 boys who are dragged into the world of drug dealing and organised crime through their parents. Their parents are drug abusers, and it kind of just spirals out of control from there, but there's so much more to it than that. It's really hard-hitting, it's funny as well at points, but like I said, I just went in blind and I completely loved it, so that's how I recommend you go as well. I feel like you don't need to know much more about it. There's like a lot of mystery, there's trigger warnings or content warnings for a lot of things, you know, like domestic assault or domestic abuse, like drug abuse obviously. It was very violent at times, like, so there is a lot of content warnings, but it is definitely an adult book. But I thought it was so good. The last 80 pages I could not stop reading. Like the ending, I literally could not read fast enough because I loved it that much. The writing is beautiful, all the characters are super compelling and likeable. There's like little bits of mystery threaded throughout, and there's so many little things like dotted throughout the entire book, and in the end it just all perfectly comes together, and I thought the ending, like, I just loved it so much. Like, I'm not even kidding, on that last 80 pages my eyes like were going faster than my brain keep up because I just wanted to figure out what was going to happen. That's how much I loved it. So definitely recommend this. If you want to know a little bit more, read the Goodreads summary, but even that's kind of vague, and I think that's a good idea. I think you should go into this not knowing much, but obviously be aware of like the content warnings that I gave. But yeah, this book is so good, and I really wish everyone would read it because it's one of my new favourite books of the year. If not maybe my favourite book of the year. I'm not going to say that yet, but it definitely is up there. The next book I read, which is also 5 stars, is The Great Hunt by Robert Jordan. This is book 2 in the Wheel of Time, and my last video, which I will link in the description, is a full spoiler review of this, just talking about everything I loved. So basically, quickly, with no spoilers, I loved the world building, I loved how we found out so much more about the magic system and the different factions of the Aes Sedai, which is like the kind of head magic users in this world. It just like continued the world building so much. There was so many more interesting characters. We found out a little bit more about like the overall story. Like just everything about this I loved. Apart from the characters spent a little less time together than I would have liked. One of my favourite parts of book 1 was that the 3 boys, Rand, Perrin and Matt, I loved their friendship, and they were kind of split up and they didn't really get on that well in this book, so I kind of disliked that. But that was my only like tiny little complaint. Like it didn't really impact, like I said, this is still a 5-star book to me. I loved it. I thought it was just as good as the first, and the ending, again, this month and good endings, oh my god, the ending of this book was so good. It like just had me completely hooked, and I can't wait to read book 3. So if you have read Wheel of Time before, check out my spoiler video, but if not, that's pretty much all I can say. The next book I read was Eleanor, Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman, and this is a Scottish author, and it's a kind of popular book on booktube. I see it semi-often, or I did at least last year. I haven't seen it that much this year, but this is another one of my new favourite books of the year. This was the funniest book I've ever read. So I don't normally really like laugh out loud at books. Like maybe I'll like blow air out my nose, but this book had me like actually laughing out loud so many times. It is about a 30-year-old woman who has had a very traumatic childhood and young adulthood, and this kind of traumatic past has left her with very strange social skills, and she is definitely suffering from mental illness as well throughout the book. And she's just one of my favourite characters I'll ever read about. She is so unintentionally hilarious. Like, just her in all these social situations is just like, it's so funny. And the book also gets really real and very serious too, but it handles it perfectly. Like, even when it's very serious and it's really dealing with her and the height of her mental illness near like the last third of the book, it still sprinkles humour in, and it does it so well. And something else I loved is that this book, so I just said before I had loved the friendship in The Wheel of Time. This book has one of the best friendships I've read about this year as well. Just one of like those pure, like, just genuinely people being nice to each other and caring for each other. And you know, this woman who has very bad social skills, like she makes a friend called Raymond, and I just love their friendship so much. And I wish I could see more of that in books. Like, if you love good, strong friendships, you will love this book, because it was one of my favourite things about it, which is like this strong like friendship where they genuinely care for each other. She shows it in her weird kind of quirky way, but he is just there for her. And yeah, I cannot recommend this book enough. I am so glad I read it, because obviously I've been trying to read a Scottish book every month, and I read Rob Roy and it was awful, and I was like, oh my god, like last month I didn't read a Scottish book, this month it's awful. So then I also picked this one up, and I'm so glad I did, because I loved it, and it's definitely one of my favourite books of the year. And now the final book that I read this month, I just finished this morning, and that was Julius Caesar by William Shakespeare. And I honestly don't really have any thoughts on this. I feel like I'm in this video on kind of a down note after all those like 5-star reviews. But I felt like it was fine. It was entertaining, I guess. I just didn't really connect to any of the characters. I didn't really care about it that much. Like, it was an interesting read, and I'm glad I read it, because it was quite short. It was like 80 pages maybe. But yeah, I don't really have any thoughts on it. I don't really know how to review it either. Like, I'm not used to reading plays. The only one I've really read was The Crucible, and I love The Crucible. I think I give that 5 stars. But I just don't really have many thoughts on this. Something I'm surprised about is that Caesar dies right at the start. Because I read this in school, like, I don't know how many years ago. Like 6 years ago, I think I read this in school. And I didn't remember that Caesar died so early on, and then it's kind of dealing with like the aftermath of his death. I thought he died in like the final act, but I don't know, like it was okay. I don't really have any thoughts. I also own Romeo and Juliet, so I'm excited to read that at some point, but yeah, just wasn't really my thing. And those were all of the books that I read in August. If you have read any of these, I would love to hear your thoughts in the comments, obviously, as always. I want to hear especially your thoughts on Julius Caesar, because I feel like I just didn't get it. Like, I don't know if I'm expecting too much. I just really don't know how I feel about it. Like, it was just okay. Definitely, if you're going to take anything away from this video, please read Boy Swallows Universe and Eleanor, Oliphant is Completely Fine. They are so good, and I cannot wait now to make my favourite books of the year video at the end of the year. Like, I've not really been that excited to do that, and I don't think I did it last year. Like, last year I didn't even bother doing it, but I'm so excited to do it this year, just so I can talk about those books again and maybe go more in depth on why I love them, because they were just so good. So please read those books, and also please subscribe, please leave a like, and I will see you in my next video.